Welcome back to the weekend wrap. No production, just my thoughts. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, relative, associate, and anyone else involved. It's all appreciated. It is a horrendous day outside, and I've got several things I need to do. So I'm gonna try and keep this one as concise as I can. First things first, let's start off with Friday or Saturday morning, as there obviously was action on the Zone. It was Most Valuable Prospects, which is a Jake Paul promotional card, and it was basically for prospects, with Amanda Serrano headlining against Daniela Ramos. Now, first thing I want to say about this, there was a fight on the undercard. I think the guy's name was Damian Lascal. He was 5-0, a Cuban with like 3 KOs, and he was facing a guy called, I think it was Rob Barlow. Not to really go into that one particularly too much, but all I want to say is I'm calling it. I think he got knockout of the year. If you haven't seen it, go find out some highlights. Damian Lascal versus Rob Barlow, or go on the Zone if you've got it. But yeah, that knockout was vicious, and I think that might be the number one. There's been some good ones this year, and obviously I'm gonna have to go back through the list, but as the year's coming to a close, I think that one might take some beating. Moving on to Amanda Serrano versus Daniela Ramos. So the first time in history that women fought 12 3-minute rounds. Obviously women have fought 3-minute rounds before on several occasions, but this is the first time where you had 12 rounds of 3 minutes, and obviously the WBC didn't sanction the bout, so it was only for the unified featherweight championship as opposed to the undisputed. My thoughts on the fight were, I applaud Amanda Serrano for doing it, and obviously proving that, yeah, women can do the same as the men, so to speak. But as I said on Twitter, I feel like the only merit for people to say that, you know, women need to be having 12 3-minute rounds is because a lot of the women's fights go the distance, and a lot of women will say is, oh well, if we had the extra minute, we'd probably get a lot more knockouts. Now, being that Amanda Serrano's probably got one of the highest knockout percentages in women's boxing, you would think to yourself, well, it's an easy layup. It's an opponent that's, you know, it's a tough opponent, but it's an opponent that doesn't have the same level of experience as you, probably, and doesn't throw in the same amount of volume that you do. But all you have to do is kind of just wear them that in. With Amanda, with someone with her body punching, you would expect her to be able to take the legs away eventually and get a stoppage. My first concern when I saw this was, why were they fighting in a ring that looked like it was a 22 by 22 ring? If the whole point of view is obviously to engage and like to have a certain presence about you and to basically, you know, take this out of the judge's hands, so to speak, you've got a ring that is literally allowing your opponent to, I'm not going to say run, because Daniela Ramos, she wasn't running, but she was on the back foot quite a bit in the fight. Not so much in the first couple rounds, but from sort of rounds 4 onwards, she realized that just exchanging with Amanda probably wasn't going to go her way, so she would try and pot shot. She'd move, create angles, and then try and catch Amanda Serrano coming in. Now, the one thing that frustrates me more than anything with Amanda Serrano is the fact that in a near 18-year career that she's had right now, she still does not know how to cut the ring off. She literally follows her opponents around the ring. So if you've got a ring that size, the whole thing you need to do as a puncher, as someone who's especially a high volume puncher, you need to create angles. You need to cut off exit points and entry pathways. You need to be able to narrow that field that person is going into. So they're gonna have to basically fight your fight. In this fight, she essentially plodded around the ring, just following Daniela Ramos. Now, yeah, she beat her up soundly, convincingly every single round. There's no question about that. But it was frustrating. And it's not even, the thing is, at this point, I don't care about the fact that I put money on that fight. yeah, it means nothing to me. I felt like with her talent, her general talent, this was a perfect opportunity for her to, you know, properly highlight and maybe get more eyes on the fact that women should have 12 threes, because that is what everyone says. Well, if you give them 12 threes, or if you give them 3-minute rounds, they're going to get more knockouts. She had the perfect opportunity for that. And yes, I'm not discrediting the fact that Daniela Ramos was extremely tough, but there was numerous occasions in that fight where Ramos was hurt badly and ready to go, and Amanda wasn't able to get to her quick enough, and she also wasn't employing to the body enough as well. So there's a bit of a frustration on that part. And I feel at this point, it's either, if she's going to do the whole 12 3 minutes, then she definitely needs to be in control of the size of the rings that she's using. And someone needs to teach her how to cut the ring off. Now, look, she's almost 36, so that's probably not going to happen now. But it's just really, it's a real shame that in all these years, that's one thing that she still has not developed. And part of that might even be because she did fight so much low level opposition before. She never had to. As soon as she sort of stepped up the levels, like, the KOs decreased, and that's purely because people know how to survive, how to get out of the way, and she's just, I guess, not athletic enough or adaptive enough to that process. But that being said, she's still a great fighter, and it was still a dominant performance. I was just a little bit underwhelmed by it, even though the fight itself, you know, it wasn't a boring fight at all. It just, I don't know, it just felt a bit of a wasted opportunity, in my opinion. Anyway, so Battle of the Baddest, opening of Riyadh season. Now, everyone knows my thoughts on not so much the event as a whole, but just the main event of that. I watched the majority of the undercard. Some of it was on YouTube, and sort of like, I guess, the before the broadcast port on TNT Sports. So I did see Takam and Bakoli. Now, I gave a prediction. I think I said initially in the prediction that I could possibly see Bakoli stopping Takam, but because he's kind of a guy that's, you know, he's sort of gets under shots and stuff, it might be a case where he just might end up going to decision. I then saw Bakoli on the scales, and the first thing I said is, if this goes past 4 rounds, I think he's in trouble. He has to win this inside 4 rounds. And I goes, Takam winning on points now potentially looks like a good bet for a lot of people. Well, Bakoli did get it done in 4 rounds, and he was very impressive for rounds 3 and 4. He was impressive rounds 3 and 4. I've got to give him that. Ultimately, what I would say is he had some. The one good thing about Martin Bakoli, he's very, very, very good at body punching. He's one of the few heavyweights that does employ a lot to the body, and he hit Takam with some sickness in the 4th round, which basically folded him over. He was wincing, backing up. Now, he was still sort of firing and exchanging, but those body shots, they were really getting to him. And then the ref, I think it was Steve Gray, just ended up sort of jumping in. Now, Takam was upset by that. I think, yes, it might have been a little bit premature. He hadn't gone down. He wasn't, concussed to the head. He wasn't sort of wobbling about at the time. But I can understand that at that particular point, it was only going to go one way. I don't think he was going to be able to get back into the fight. And because of that, it was probably the correct decision, even if maybe he could have let it go on a couple seconds more. But Moses Atalma, you know, he basically did his job. I think it was 1st round. I can't really remember, but he did what he needed to do. So congrats to him. Then we got to Arslanbek Makhmudov against Junior Martin Wright, I think his name was. I had said that has to end within 3 rounds, and this was, to be fair, I said 3 rounds. I mean, look, it ended in less than 90 seconds. Now, to be fair, I'm going to give Junior his props, because he didn't run, essentially. Like, he tried to exchange and meet Arslanbek, you know, in the middle. He tried to fire back with firepower, but he just did not have an answer for the heavy-handedness of Makhmudov and the short counters that he had. And yeah, it was the first knockdown was a peach of a knockdown, and then secondly he was exchanging while hurt. He did get stunned again, but he was still on his feet. I'm not gonna say he was lucid, but again, ref jumped in and said, no, that's enough. And to be fair, he didn't really argue that either. So even though you could have said maybe you give him one more chance because he was still up on his feet with his guard up, but again, it was going one way, so fair dues to him. Now, Joseph Parker versus Simon Keane. This was a I thought Parker would get it done a bit later in the fight. I knew that he was going to beat Keane by a knockout, just because Keane, when he gets hit, he loses his shape quite visibly, and then sort of you can kind of tee off and you can get other shots off on him before he's then able to maybe try and do a sweeping counter or something. Now, he's not a terrible heavyweight by any stretch of the imagination. He's just sort of a very kind of basic heavy-handed guy, but as soon as you can kind of dictate the pace, it's not really it's not particularly gonna be a hard night's work if you've got anything about you. And ultimately, yeah, Joseph Parker got into his groove, landed a devastating uppercut in the third round straight through the guard, and yeah, Simon Keane fell, dropped down, and he either couldn't get back up or he didn't want any more. Now, I think it was he couldn't get back up because he got helped onto a stool afterwards, and he did not look clear-eyed at all. So Joseph Parker, another victory for him on his way back to whether it's a title shot or just to be in fun fights for big money. I'm not sure what he wants to do moving forward, but yeah, the display itself, outside of maybe a bit of round two, it was a pretty decent display for him. So that's cool. Then we had what I think everyone will call the people's main event, Fabio Wardley versus David Adelier. And I had said, if you guys remember the basis picks, I pretty much said that, look, there could be a situation here where I think Fabio catches something in about the third round where he gets hurt, and then maybe maybe Adelaide then comes on and sort of tries to exchange, but in that moment Fabio then hits him with something, and it could be a problem, especially with the fact that David's body construct, to me, does not look like it can hold a solid shot. His legs and his lower body is very, very skinny compared to his upper body. Now, his upper body I'm not saying it's pumped up like muscle in terms of weights and stuff. I don't believe that at all. But I think just the way his composition is, it's a little bit like Tyson Fury. He's got a big torso but skinny legs. So when you end up taking a shot, it's hard for your body to absorb all of that because it's not balanced correctly. And ultimately, he caught Fabio with, I think it was a hard left hook in an exchange. It was like a double left hook possibly. And that's basically where Fabio had to switch to basically readjust and do the same thing. Now, I predicted that he would sort of get it done in the fifth round. He ended up getting it done in the seventh. But David, as I had said, like his York Hall performance prior to this one told me that if someone tries to get aggressive with him, he doesn't like it, and he wants to basically clinch and hold and dirty tactics, forearms in the throat, elbows in the throat kind of thing, pushing the person off, like really almost trying to force them over the ropes. He did that a couple of times with Fabio, and I've seen it in other fights where if you put pressure on him, applied pressure, smart pressure, he does back off. He doesn't stand his ground and basically force you back. He goes on his bike, whether he's looking for angles or whatever. And that was one of the things that said to me that when this fight, if it gets to that particular stage, Fabio is going to be the aggressor, and he's probably going to control how the fight goes, because David's not going to stand his ground and impose his size. And ultimately, that's what happened. They had a clinch. They broke off from a clinch. Fabio came in with that cross right, which just grazed David's chin. But what it did was it pushed his face into the trajectory of the big left hook that came after it. And then, David, down he went in the seventh round. Now, I can't lie. I did like the image of him on the ground poking his tongue out with blood pouring from his mouth. I thought that was funny. But as he kind of he got up on the 9 count. So I guess over in Saudi they allow that, because I know in the UK sometimes if you don't make the 8, they say it's over. But he got up, and then I remember it was funny because he then pointed to Fabio and like, right here, like stay here and let's sort of swing it out. But in that moment, I don't think his head was clear, because he threw one, I think he maybe threw one sort of half-hearted punch, but everything else was tucked up. I thought in that particular moment, being that him and Fabio, he can just, like, he's not really that coherent. I thought he would have just swung for the high heavens and just seen what happened. If he can connect something. But he tried to sort of, tuck up and post up. But he got caught several shots. He tried to exchange one. Then he sort of got knocked off balance. And then the referee ended up jumping in. He then pushes the referee. The referee's waved it off. And then he gives the referee a body shot. And it didn't, I'm not going to say it was the hardest shot in the world, but it didn't look like a tap. It looked like he, put a little bit of force behind that. Like, what you doing kind of thing. He's probably going to face a suspension right now, or if not a suspension, a definite fine. I mean, he'll be on a medical suspension anyway because he got knocked out, but he could, yes, I'm sure there will be a fine either taken from his purse or that he'll have to pay to the BBBOC, because obviously you're not allowed to put your hands on a ref. If you have that little sort of that initial push in the moment, that's one thing, but then to calculatedly walk up to the ref afterwards and punch him there's not going to be any defense you can have for that. Even if you try to act like, I don't know what was going on, my mind wasn't clear, like, it's on camera and you're going to be in trouble. So I'm interested to see what happens with that scenario. But big ups to Fabio Wardley. Like, he's obviously proved that he's not this soft guy that a lot of people seem to claim he might be, just because he's from Ipswich and he's well spoken and other things which I won't really go into here. But that prediction stuck as well. It was 2 rounds later than I thought it would be, but ultimately Fabio got that one, and it was great. Now, I actually didn't watch the main event until this morning. So I'm going to do, let me talk about what I did watch, and then I'm going to come back to that. So we had the matchroom card in Cancun. Sugar Nunes, first round KO. That was brutal, pretty much as well. Ref did the right thing by stopping that one, but the initial knockdown was savage. Eduardo Nunes is a problem. 25 wins, 25 KOs, and he's a super feather as well. So he's in the same division as Rocky Hernandez, Shaki Foster, Joe Cordina, Emmanuel Navarrete. Like, so he's in line. He's going to be interesting. Then we had Justice Huni against Andrew Tabiti. Now, again, this prediction, I got this one right as well. I did predict it would go the distance, because Tabiti is clever enough and defensively responsible enough to keep out if he's not, if he's hurt. And Justice, as much as he wants to be, I think because he's so fast, he just doesn't get the he doesn't properly sit down on the shots the way he wants to. So while he's got that power, it's just not enough to have that one punch KO. And I think he needs to stop trying to look for the one punch KO. Like, that's not his strength. He can knock people out via accumulation, via maybe setting them up for something they don't see, but just sort of trying to trade in the pocket. All that's doing is making him ship more punishment himself than he needs to, regardless of the fact he's got a great chin, he's got great senses, he's always kind of switched on. You don't need to be caught in the exchange when there's no reason for that to happen. But he comfortably won the fight. I don't remember what the scorecards were, but I didn't really need to see them. He won the whole first half of the fight. I would say the first 3 to 4 rounds quite comfortably. Middle rounds were a lot more competitive, and then he finished strong, but just he couldn't close the show, but I wasn't expecting him to anyway. Andrew Tabiti is no, he's no scrub. He's a world level operator. He was at cruiserweight. At heavyweight, he's probably like a fringe world, like a gatekeeper-ish type guy. So he'll come back and he'll actually get some wins against guys you wouldn't expect. So I would expect Tabiti to do a few, to upset a couple people. But Justice Huni, obviously showing his pedigree, showing his toughness. But I think he needs to get back to the skills that basically got him lauded as such a big talent, because trying to be the one punch knockout artist just isn't really gonna be your bag at this point. But the main event, Shaki Foster versus Rocky Hernandez. Now, this one, I got this one wrong. I did think, due to constant pressure, there also being a much smaller ring, and obviously everything being, I guess, against Shaki Foster, I knew he would win. I thought he would win the first half of the fight quite comfortably and slowly sort of just get ground down, not be able to manage the pace, and sort of just get caught with something late on, and then start getting hit and then like taken out. I think I said around 10 or around 11. Well, the opposite happened. So Eduardo Rocky Hernandez was actually winning sort of a lot of the earlier rounds via activity more than anything. Shaki Foster was, he was counterpunching, he was pickpocketing, he was doing well in that sense, but there was times where he was just moving about a bit too much, and it just looked like Rocky was being the busier guy. But the fight, it's in the balance. It's one of those ones where at the time you think to yourself, well, Hernandez could quite easily be winning this. Foster's having success, but Hernandez is just doing more, and it's in his hometown. You've got to really do a lot more than you're doing, especially if you want to keep that belt. Come the 11th round, round of the year, without a doubt. Thus far, I've not seen a better round than that. And it reminds me of, I think it was round number 5 last year with Kenshiro Taraji and Hiroto Kiyoguchi, where Kenshiro was beating the brakes off of Hiroto. I think slightly punched himself out, and Hiroto caught him with a counter, came back, and basically damn near knocked him down and almost got him out of there in that same round. But just due to his composure and being able to slip and ride some of the shots, he was then able to make it to the end of the round for the final bell, and then came back right at the end and managed to exchange back in his favor. That round there, I need to watch that round because that was brilliant. But this one, yes, it was very similar to that. Hernandez came forward like he was applying pressure. He threw a big shot towards Shaki Foster, and Foster managed to counter it. And as he countered it, Hernandez's legs dipped, and he almost touched down, but he managed to stay on his feet. But from that moment, he's just getting pasted by Shaki Foster. He's throwing. He's throwing. He's got his arms up. He's tucking up. He's covering up. He's riding some of the shots. You can look. The ref's looking like, oh, I think I might need to stop this because it's getting. I think he's in trouble here. And then he's tried to exchange back. He's caught another couple of shots. He's riding some. All of a sudden, he then just bounces off the ropes and swings a big left hook, which takes Shaki Foster by surprise. He stumbles back, and then he gets backed up to the ropes. And then Hernandez starts doing almost like some little pity patter stuff, just trying to see where the guard is. And then he just starts swinging. And then Shaki Foster just on the ropes he's now having to protect himself, slip and slide, but he's getting caught with certain shots. They don't look as hard at this point, but he's getting caught, and he's been hurt, but he's more composed and more controlled until the point where it gets. And then he even comes back right towards the end, just before the round ends. It was a tremendous exchange, and I don't think we're going to see better for the rest of the year. Again, I need to go back and watch some of the older fights just to make sure that I'm not using recency bias here, but I think that is the best round I've seen of boxing in 2023. Then ultimately, the next round, Hernandez is tired, he's hurt, he's wounded. He was a wounded animal in the last one, and I feel like he kind of just went out on his shield at that moment. Shaki Foster then just basically applies that pressure, those sharp snapping punches, and then just manages to take out Hernandez in the last round. Dropped him twice. He got back up. He tried to survive the rest of it, and then the ref jumped in. I know he wasn't happy that the ref jumped in, but at that point the writing was on the wall. But it was interesting because at that moment, if the referee didn't wave it off, Hernandez would have actually won the fight via split decision on the cards, because on one card he was up 11 rounds to 0, which, yeah, that guy needs he probably needs firing, because even if you say he won, like, he didn't win all 11 rounds. Like, there's no way that happened. And that's including round 11, where he basically had Hernandez like dipped on the ground ready to go, and Hernandez had a good salvo at the end, but he gave him that round as well. The other one, I think, was 8 rounds to 3, and then the other round was 7 rounds to 4 for Shaki Foster. So he would have lost the fight on a split decision despite those 2 knockdowns. So yeah, it was that was very, very interesting, but it was a good competitive fight. It was, I think, probably the best fight of the weekend overall, like if you look at it from every sort of perspective. And I'm looking forward to when I get to see Shaki Foster again. He might sign a short-term deal now with Matchroom, so that we can see what's gonna basically be taking place with that. And obviously there's unifications to happen and take place. So that's one for the book. So we'll take a look and we'll see what's happening there. Lastly but not least, this morning I did manage to watch the Ngannou versus Fury fight. Now look, I'm gonna be a big hypocrite here, because I'm always a proponent of moments don't win fights. Like, you know, whoever wins the most rounds outside of a knockout wins a fight. That's how I look at things. Now, I wasn't scoring the fight, but from what I saw, like, forget rounds, forget everything, Ngannou won. The fact Ngannou went the distance, he won. The fact he knocked down the quote-unquote greatest heavyweight of this era, the greatest heavyweight of all time, he won. The fact that he traded and had moments where Tyson would, where he actually outboxed the supposed greatest boxer, like, he won. All I'm saying is, I've been said from 2019 up until now, Tyson Fury is not what people thought he was. I've said he's been overhyped for the longest time. I've said people have given him plaudits for a resume that doesn't deserve it. And he's one thing is, he's a master of spin, because he's the only person I know that can get victories without actually fighting people. Like, anytime someone else loses a fight, oh yeah, see, that's why Tyson didn't need to fight him. Some of the PBC guys used to sort of get away with that as well, but he's got it on such a global scale. I've always said his skills are not that good. Like, his best asset is his mind games, his ability to control someone in the ring, to hide his deficiencies, to maybe take their best weapon away from them, or to make them fight in a way that advantages him. So if they're an aggressive person, he calms them down. If they're a calm person, he makes them fight with aggression, and that messes them up. That's always been his best attribute to me. The whole, he moves like a middleweight, he's never moved like a middleweight. Like, I've never subscribed to that. Yes, he's got power, like every single heavyweight's got power, but he's not this big massive puncher. Fighting Deontay Wilder 3 times didn't proclaim him to be the greatest of all time. And the only person that ever should have got away with saying that kind of thing is his promoter, Frank Warren, and Bob Arum. No one else in this, all of these so-called journalists and these boxing experts, like, saying, oh yeah, he's the greatest, or he's the best of this era, blah blah blah. Okay, cool. You might say he appears the best now, but against who? You look at his resume, for the most part, I'm not saying all of it, because he has had some good wins on his resume, but it's very Wilder-esque. There's not a huge amount of sample size there to determine how good he really is. Now, to be fair, I've had to keep quiet for the last year and a half, because I did predict that Dillian White would beat him and give him trouble, and Dillian got smoked, and smoked quite badly. I can't really talk with the same level of vim once that's happened, so I gotta keep quiet. But prior to that, anyone who knows me, and even on some of these videos, I'm sure you would have seen it, I've said he's not all that. He's not what people think, people proclaim him to be. And he got exposed. Now, maybe he didn't take the fight serious. Maybe he's not training correctly. Maybe he is carrying injuries or whatnot. But this is a guy that's never fought a professional boxing match before, and he outboxed you at times. Like, let's actually like consider that. I'm really take that in. That's not supposed to happen. And now, just a bit like with Tommy Fury, with the whole misfits and, you know, Jake Paul and whatever, the quote unquote professional boxer going life and death with YouTubers, you've got the professional boxer again, life and death, winning a split decision with an MMA fighter. I mean, tell me if, like, every time you get it, like, literally the Furies always seem to just mess the script up. It's crazy how that happens. Like, they constantly just throw in the sport into disrepute. But on this one, look, I'm glad it happened, because now at least maybe people will, unless they're really going to try and say, oh, you see, well, Francis Ngannou he was just so much better than we thought he was, blah blah blah. They need to just look at it and say, okay, maybe Fury's not as great as we were led to believe. Now we need to see him in these other fights against these other guys to determine just what level he is at. And if that Usyk fight now doesn't happen, it was never going to happen December 23rd, we know why. And if he ends up retiring or doing something like that, don't let him retire and keep the belt. If he says, oh, I need to take a break or I'm going away, take that belt off him, let someone else fight for it, or let Usyk fight for the vacant title against somebody else, get that undisputed out the way, then move on to the next things, because we can't have him holding up the division any longer. And partly, I think the whole reason, I've said it before, the reason why they announced that fight was signed was just to get more eyes on this event, because people are more willing to buy it because they know something else is up around the corner. Now, don't get me wrong, the event itself, from what I watched the entire undercard part, the arena, amazing. The celebrity list, amazing. I didn't really watch any of the shoulder content throughout the week because I didn't care. Everyone knows when I say I'm not going to support something or watch it or buy it, or I'm not going to. But on this particular occasion, because people messaged me like, yeah, you need to check this one out. So I did. But the event, Riyadh season, amazing. It's been amazing. I've seen it before. Like, they go hard. Like, they know what they're doing. But that I had no interest in. But the fact that he's basically, again, thrown boxing into disrepute again, that Fury story, yeah, it's long, and I don't know how he and his image of being that number one can really come back from this. Hence one of the reasons I always said Usyk beats this guy, because he doesn't like movement, and when he can't control and when he can't, mind games this, mind games that, he struggles. And yeah, we've seen it here. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've got a christening to go to, then I've got an event to hit up in Wembley a little later on, so I'm going to leave you lot with that. I think people in the house are rushing me to kind of get a move on, so boy, we'll see what we do later on. Anyway, more videos, more content coming up throughout the week. We'll probably dissect a lot of this on the breakdown on Tuesday. Sean George, Jean Gelay's trainer, will also be on the show, so tune in for that on the Undefeated Podcast channel. But I will leave it there. I will catch you guys on the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next one, peace.